What? Gospel. It means good news, glad tidings. And what makes God's kingdom, God's governing, good news? Isaiah tells us today, God gives power to the faint. And our psalm, God rebuilds, gathers exiles, heals the brokenhearted, knows each name. And here in the Gospel of Mark, it is God power at the speed of light. Still in chapter 1, bam, Sabbath day, Simon Peter and Andrew's hometown. Jesus in the synagogue, astounding authority. The people are blown away. And then there's this man there who's afflicted, an evil spirit. Jesus frees the man, sends that demon packing, and the rumors spread like wildfire. And he's not only preaching the good news, Jesus is the good news. He's energy and hope and healing, compassion, common sense, steadfastness. And those 4 new disciples are caught up in the action, growing in faith. And now today's story, arriving at their house, they find Simon Peter's mother-in-law has a fever. Now, recently, this flu seems to have made its way around here. I wonder if anybody here got the flu. And I wonder if you could show me, even if you didn't get the flu recently, what is the body posture when you have a fever? What are you doing with your body when you have a fever? Like, ugh, right? Your arms are heavy. Your hands are heavy, hands are floppy. Maybe you want to raise your head, but you can only manage one eyebrow and not for very long. You're deflated, like you're breathing out more than you're breathing in. Fevers make you puny. And think about it, back then, no ibuprofen, no antibiotics. A fever's pretty scary. And surely the fear of death was in that room, in that house. But those 4 disciples, they are now steeped in good news. They know Jesus is God power. And so they just tell him, hey, my mother-in-law's sick. Folks, this is the pattern of intercessory prayer. First, you give yourself into God's presence, and then you bring others into that presence. And here's Jesus' first recorded healing. He reaches out, grabs her hand, and raises her up from the fever. From the fear of death, he raises her up. Suzanne Guthrie points out that the same word, raised up, the verb agero, is used for Jesus' resurrection. Later on, it's the same word. This is resurrection style good news, a human body experience, and we're still in chapter 1. Now, before I asked you to show me the body posture of fever, now how about good news? How do we act when we get good news? Like you get a call that you just got your dream job. Or out of the blue, the most charming one in your high school is inviting you to the prom. What are the postures of good news? Let me see it. Okay, yeah. Sitting back, you're breathing in more than you're breathing out. Your shoulders go like, oh, man, that feels good. It feels good just to do it. Maybe some of you can remember back to about a week ago. When the Seahawks had really high hopes there at the end of getting another touchdown at the last minute or so, and how that felt for them. And then when the Patriots actually managed to squeak out their win, what did good news look like for those sports guys? Or being dashed. Okay, but what is good news? I mean, it makes you hop up and down, right? It makes you dance, it makes you move, makes your shoulders go out. So good news is the opposite of droopy fever. Good news means energy and joy and hope, and gospel good news actually means dignity. So Jesus raises up Simon Peter's mother-in-law, and she is energized, and she in turn ministers to them, just like the angels ministered to Jesus in the wilderness and built him back up after his 40 days and his temptations. It's the same word, it's the Greek word diakoneo. Simon Peter's mother-in-law becomes a deacon for them. And the crowds stream to that house, and the friends and family are bringing their ailing loved ones, and Jesus healing and casting out demons, and all are being steeped and strengthened in the good news, the gospel of God power right here. Oh my gosh, right here. And it's in chapter 1. We're still in chapter 1. Scholar Megan McKenna writes, Simon's house, run by his mother-in-law, becomes a household of God, a church, a gathering of those in need of healing and forgiveness, the new gathering place, the new company of Jesus. So already in chapter 1 of the Gospel of Mark, we have intercession, we have resurrection, we have church, the gathering of the faithful, energized by the good news in word and deed, empowered to serve, to minister to each other and to welcome others, and generations of discipleship already, a pattern of empowerment and ministry. Jesus himself, baptized and energized in God's love, and then tempted, and then strengthened and ministered to by angels, and then preaching and teaching and healing, and then ministered to and strengthened by the mother-in-law, and then more ministry, and then sleep and prayer, and on to the next ministry. And the 4 disciples have the same pattern. They're called and they're heartened by witnessing Jesus, and they in turn bring the mother-in-law into the presence and power of God in Christ. And we see the same pattern in her. Her healing gives her an evangelical abundance of strength. She hops up and starts ministering. Can you imagine the energy and the excitement and God power and ministry that extended in concentric ripples from the healings that Jesus was doing at Peter's door? This is the flow and the ebb of our faith lives and our church life. Here we gather for good news. We steep ourselves in the presence of God. We hold beloved others in God's presence for healing and transformation. Here we raise each other up. But the strength we gain here is also for ministry beyond ourselves. When the disciples track down Jesus as he's praying, "Hey, everyone's looking for you," he replies, "I know, but let's move on. Got to spread the good news in the neighboring towns too." And in Paul's ministry, as we read today, a similar drive to move on, to spread the good news of God power to as many communities as possible. Paul writes, "To the Jews, I became a Jew in order to win Jews. To those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, so I might win those outside the law. I have become all things to all people, so that I might by all means save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, so that I may share in its blessings." To me, because I minister in a different language, this means Paul learned the languages, the logic, the perspectives of these different communities in order to be able to reach out to them and serve them and raise them up more efficiently in the good news of God power. My favorite anecdote of a person becoming like others in order to serve them was shared by a woman who had been a drug addict and street prostitute for over a decade. She was talking about one of her first days in a rehab community called Magdalene House in Nashville, Tennessee. And she was really kind of nervous about meeting the priest who founded the program. I guess she was worried about being judged or about feeling awkward around a religious person. And so she was waiting in this group of women, looking around, and finally she asked when that priest was supposed to show up. "Oh, that's her right there." The Reverend Becca Stevens was wearing cutoffs and a t-shirt, and she had her toddler on her hip. She was looking like any other woman there. And many of you will be proud to know that our own Magdalene community here in St. Louis is actually opening its doors in April after 3 years of intense preparation. So thanks to those of you who have been involved in it. So as we gather today, celebrating the good news of Christ incarnate in you, in this congregation of St. Martin's, I ask you to consider, what is the flow and the ebb of your faith life? When you come here on Sundays and other times, are you consciously seeking the gospel? Are you consciously striving to become more aware of the good news of God's power at work in and through and around you? Do you feel that your body, do you feel that good news in your body, in your postures of prayer and praise? Are you building faithful practices, faithful patterns of practicing the presence of God and bringing others into that presence here in this community and in your personal prayers and spiritual practices? Are you reaching out to others and raising them up? Are you willing to reach up and grasp a hand that's extended to you? In what ways are you learning new languages, new perspectives, becoming like others in order to further share the good news of God's power in Christ? So if you're feeling playful and brave enough, to me, the key image of this little gospel story is that hand, Jesus reaching to the woman and raising her up. And so I would encourage you, but not force you, that you could partner with a person near you as a way of remembering this raising up to ministry that happens in today's gospel. For instance, one of you could stand up first and grasp the hand of the other and raise that person up. You could take turns during the Episcopal calisthenics remaining in our worship today. Like the first opportunity occurs now as we stand together to say the Nicene Creed. And I think the next opportunity occurs at the passing of the peace, and then you'd be even. So let us raise each other up as we stand to say together the traditional foundations of our faith in Christ.